B'shus the Mora de Asra, one of my most precious Talmidim, a Talmud I am extremely proud of, Talmud Machkem Es Rabbi, and I feel at home in this base medrash because I've given many shiurim, but I know the Avreichim of the Koilel. I look around this room and I know about 20% of the faces, but not more. So it's a schus for me to be with you tonight. I gave a shir tonight, and then I went to Neve Yakov for a simcha of one of my talmidim, and it's a nest that I made it back here on time. So it's almost Purim. And Purim is a very special day, in a way unique. And probably the strangest halacha in Purim, which so many Gedolim struggled with, is Chayev inish levesume adela yoda ben oror homen leborach Mordechai. What's the point? Do we need to get to a stage in which you lose your mind and you no longer differentiate between good and bad? V'shavta v'ra'iso ben tzadik l'rosha. So when exactly do we need to sing Shoshanas Yankov? When? Tisha B'Av? When? Sora B'Teves, Rosh Hashanah. When are we supposed to sing Shoshanas Yankov Tzolav Samecha Oror Homen V'Borach Mordechai? Esther min HaTorah menayin Chulin Daf Kuf Mem V'onoichi hastir astir ponai. Only a fool would try to understand Chazal. Esther, Hester rhymes, and maybe that's the remez. It's not the way we learn Chazal. When we learn Chazal, there has to be something more meaningful in the remez of Esther min HaTorah menayin. So in halacha and in Yiddishkeit, remembering is very fundamental. We are supposed to remember our days of glory, and we are supposed to remember our days of tragedy. Arba'at Tzaimis, all associated with Churban Beis HaMikdash, and Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is so fundamental. Sholosh HaGolim, Shabbos Kodesh. It's not only Leila Seder. Every day throughout the year, Boiker ve'erev, morning and night, we have the mitzvah of Schiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. All the mitzvahs of Bechoira, Bechoir Odom, Bechor Behemet Tahora, Bechor Behemet Tameya, all are Ezeicha Yetzias Mitzrayim. Remembering the past is one of the most fundamental ideas in Yiddishkeit. Why is it so important to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim? Famous Ramban at the end of Parshas Boi. Min hanisim hagedolim v'hamifursamim, od hamoide benisim hanestorim sheheim yesoid kol haTorah kulo. Ein lanu chelek b'Torahs Moshe, ad sheneda, shekol dvorenu v'mekreinu hem nisim ein behem teva v'minhagoi shel olam. Why is it so important to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim? Because those were the great miracles above and beyond the realm of natural phenomena. And we need to remember those miracles because the Kodesh Baruch Hu tells us they will not be in later days. In later generations, the Kodesh Baruch Hu would not perform miracles that have no explanation, entirely supernatural. Remember those miracles so that you should appreciate and believe and see Nisim Hanistorim Sheheim Yesod Kol HaTorah Kulo. Life is the greatest miracle. We are surrounded with miracles every day. הניסחו שבכל יום ימונו, והנפלויסחו שבכל ערב ובוקר וצהריים. From those magnificent supernatural events, we are to appreciate the day-to-day miracles, the Nisim Anastorim, the miracles of concealment. So we have many mitzvahs associated with Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then we have two Zmanim D'Rabbanon, and both come to commemorate and to bring to mind miracles of later times, after Kabbalah Satorah, after Yetzias Mitzrayim, after Ma'amad Har Sinai, and that's Purim and Chanukah. What is unique about Purim, unlike all the others, Yetzias Mitzrayim from A to Z, from beginning to end, everything was Lamala Mederach HaTeva, Aseres HaMakkos, Kriyas Yamsuf. Ma'amad Har Sinai, which we remember, was entirely Lamala Mederach HaTeva. And even Chanukah, yes, it was an amazing victory. But war is war, and there were casualties. But they still had the Nes Pach HaShemen, which was above and beyond the realm of nature. Purim, everything was natural. There was no manifestation, no expression of the supernatural, of Lamala Mederach HaTeva. But what was unique in Purim is, it was so obvious, and everybody saw, Yad Hashem B'toch HaTeva, this amazing chain of events, one after the other, and everything fell into place. And everything that seemed to spell tragedy for Klal Yisrael was actually a part of the Geula, a part of their salvation. So when the Pur fell on Chodesh Adar, Haman's advisors, every politician today has a yoetz le'inyanei charedim. Haman also had an advisor on Haredi affairs, and they told him, you don't know what a lucky man you are. Chodesh Adar is a terrible month. Moshe Rabbeinu died on Chodesh Adar. And they didn't know that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Chodesh Adar. And the fact that he died in Adar is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamala shnoseim shel tzadikim miyoim liyoim. Thousands of women and girls were brought together to the palace for that crazy king to choose. And you know what it is? A year of cosmetics, 12 months. It's insane. Sheshe Chadushim b'Shem Amor, Sheshe Chadushim b'Tamrik HaNoshem, and they were all busy to be as appealing as possible. One little tzaddikus, Abbas Yisrael, Loi Bikshe Dover. She wants to be at least appealing as ever possible, and she's sitting in her corner saying Tillim day and night, trying to be like a fly on the wall, totally transparent. And out of all the thousands, whom did he choose? Esther. And everybody was crying in the Jewish camp. What a midas adin, what a tragedy. How could this be? How did that Rasha choose the daughter of the Gadol Ador that was raised b'kedusha v'tahara, and abayis shekuloi kedusha, abayis shekuloi tahara? It seemed to me the worst midas adin that you could imagine. And then, at a later stage, you just left your house and you couldn't avoid seeing that skyscraper in the middle of town, the Eitz Gavoya Chamishim Amo. In those days, it was a skyscraper. And I imagine Jews couldn't lift their eyes. It was just heartbreak. They walked the streets and looked down. They couldn't see that Eitz because everybody knew who's going to be hanging and dangling off that pillar. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one event after the other, and everything that seemed to spell tragedy, ben hafoicho. And it was so obvious that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching over us. So this was the only nace that we remember every year, never to forget, which was entirely natural. No manifestation of the supernatural, nothing above and beyond the realm of nature. And that is the importance of Purim in later generations. That is the greatest expression of what the Ramban teaches us. So the Ramat brings a minig. צורך לפרוס את המגילה כאיגרס כדי להרוס הנס. We don't read the Megillah when it's Beglila like a Sefer Torah. You spread out the Megillah. People should see the nes. How do they see the nes? Maybe the Torah Satfus and the Ramat should say, Tzorech lifrois es ha-Megillah kigeres kedei laharois ha-Megillah. Do we want everybody to... How do we show the nes? When you read the Megillah, one yariah at a time, you don't appreciate the nes. It's a story. Fascinating story. To appreciate the nes, you need to read the Megillah b'skira achas. And I jokingly say, if it would be possible, Chazal would be mataken that you need to read the entire Megillah b'neshima achas, but we barely make it to Vaizosa. So it's impossible. But that's the way you need to read the Megillah, to realize and appreciate the Hashgacha Pratis. Nothing supernatural, nothing really miraculous, but the Hashgacha v'Kodesh Baruch Hu. And the message is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control, and He watches over us. And even in the depth of despair, those very same events that seem to spell tragedy and such a terrible midas adin, when hafoichu asher yishretu haYehudim heimo b'soinayim. And that is the remez of Esther menatoyer menayin v'onochi hastia ponai. It's not a rhyme. It's not Esther Hester. That is what the Megillah is all about. In days of Hester Purim, in days of difficulty and tragedy, believe, like it was so obvious and evident in the days of Mordechai and Esther, when it was so clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu metaken retia min hamaka, and Midas Adin is transformed to Midas Arachman, from the depth of despair to the height of gratitude and hoidoya to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we don't say Hallel on Purim. And the Gemara deals in Megillah Daf Yudalad, why don't we say Hallel? And one of the terutzim, and that is the major teretz that everybody quotes, is Kriyosa Zu Hilula. Reading the Megillah is essentially Hallel, but it is not, because there's not one posik and one remez in the Megillah of gratitude. Kodesh Baruch Hu isn't mentioned in the Megillah. And there's not even the slightest expression of gratitude for Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's a Hallel Nistar, because everything in Purim is Nistar. It's V'onoichi hastia astia ponai, so the Hallel is Nistar, because the Nes was Nistar, and that is what it's all about. That is what the Megillah teaches us. In days of Hester Purim, in days of Goddess, we wish we would see supernatural events. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should open the skies and we should see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it's not going to happen. Kach gozra chochmosa yizborach shamayim. And that is the chizik we have of the story of the Megillah. Tzorach lifrois es ha-Megillah ki igeres kedei laharot et hanes. Appreciate. Be aware. Just think of this chain of events, one after the other, leading ultimately to the greatest nes and the greatest salvation. The Gezerah of Haman was the most terrible Gezerah we ever witnessed. Never before, and almost never after. A Gezerah of total annihilation of Klal Yisrael. Paroi never had this in mind. We had hundreds of years of Gonas, of Avdus, Vavodum, Ve'inu, Oisam, Arba, Meis, Shana. For a short while, there was a Gezerah called a Bena Yaloid, Haya Oiru Tashlicheno. Only newborn, only boys, not girls. And in the days of the Avonim, the Greeks, the Gezerah was Lashkicham Terosecho, Lavira Mechukaretzenecho. Never before did anybody plan lahashmed or lahareg or laabed es kol haYehudim, to destroy them all. And from Haman to Hitler, everybody planned the final solution. So the Gzeira was like no other we ever experienced before. And the salvation, the Geula, was like no other we experienced before. For Geulas Mitzrayim, we paid a terrible price. Hundreds of years of avdus, thousands of lives lost, little babies thrown into the sea and drowned in the sea. Hanukkah, there was war, and there were many casualties. And Matisyahu lost half of his family in battle. In Purim, not one Jew was hurt. Not one Jew was harmed. We didn't lose one person. Not even one was harmed in any way. From the depth of despair, from Gzeira more horrific than any other we witnessed before, to a Hatzalah like no other we witnessed before. A total Hatzalah, and no Jew was hurt. And that is the nace of Racha Mishamayim. Hodor kiblu b'mei Achashverosh. Rashi writes, Ma'avas hanes. But we knew many nisim. And what is the expression Ahavas hanes? It should be Ahavas Hashem or Simchas hanes. This was a nace like no other. It was a nace like no other. The Gzeira was the most horrible Gzeira we ever experienced, and the Hatzalah was such a total Hatzalah like never before and never after. That is Ma'avas hanes. It brought them so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that once again, they were so close and so dovek in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and once again they were Makdem Nasa L'Nishma. And that is Purim. And that is the lesson Purim teaches us. And it is a lesson that is so important in later days. In the past 2 years, we've been through difficult times, a terrible war. Thousands of young people lost their lives. And in the entire world, a dramatic rise of anti-Semitism. And just a few weeks ago, this terrible terror attack in Sydney, Australia. So we need Chizzuk. And it is in these days that we derive Chizzuk from Megillah Esther and from the Nes of Purim. When things seem to be so bad, we need to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. He's on our side. And when you have a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you put your trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you're betuach b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is why the Ramat writes, if somebody forgot to say Ala Nisim and Berchas HaMazon, you say Hu Rachamon Hu Yasa Lanu Nisim V'Neflois. So coming back to Chayav Inish Levesume Bepuria Ad Lo Yoda, what do we want to hear? Do we want to hear such terrible things? Do we expect the person to stand in shul and cry out, Ora Mordechai v'Borach Haman? Is that what we want to hear? I say no. Purim is all about Esther. Megillas Esther, it's brought in the name of the girl. Megillas Esther is Gilui Shel HaSeisa. We want to bring out the Seisa. So all year round, everybody says, day and night, Ora Haman v'Borach Mordechai. But usually people say what they know we expect to hear. Everybody wants to be what is called today politically correct. It is only natural that everybody would say Ora Haman v'Borach Mordechai. But sometimes it might be menasofa v'lechutz. It might be lip service. Purim we drink. Your mind loses control. Your mind no longer controls what comes out of your lips. And that is when we want to hear, loud and clear, Ora Haman v'Borach Mordechai. Purim, it must come from within. Purim, it must come from Amokim Nista, from the deepest parts in your heart, in which you yourself sometimes aren't aware of. And that is the point in Chayav Inish Levesume Ad Lo Yoda. Your consciousness, your mind no longer has any control. And your heart speaks. And that is when we want to hear Oror, Haman, V'borach Mordechai, nothing else. But Purim, it's the Gilui Shel HaSeiser. Purim is the day of concealment, and we bring out to the light of day where your innermost feelings are. And that is the inyan of Chai V'inish Levesume Aded de la Yoda. Your mind no longer has control, and that is when your heart speaks. And we hope to hear Oror Haman V'borach Mordechai. Hoda Kiblu B'mei Achashverosh. So this is a very, very special day. And it is a day of Divrei, because more than anything else, it's a day of B'tochon and Amunah. It's a day to remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us, and He sees us even though we don't always see Him. We would love to see Gewaldige Nisim, Lamara Mederach HaTeva. I said many times in the past 2 years when this war was at its height, it would be so wonderful. There should be breaking news in the entire world that all the waters in Gaza turned red, and in Lebanon as well, and nobody understood why. And they brought the greatest chemists, and the waters turned into blood. And the other day, a zillion frogs overran Gaza. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And we really didn't expect it to happen, because Kadosh Baruch Hu told us in advance, and that is why we have Purim. Within the Hester Ponim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always in control. Ki ahorim timoteno, v'chazdi me'itach lo tamush. Hatishkach isha ulo, merachem pri bitna. Would a mother ever forsake her children? V'onoichi lo eskochech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not forsake us, He will not forget us, and He's always with us. And Midas Adin is transformed to Midas Arachamim, and that is what Purim is all about. So Purim is a Chizzuk, a day of Chizzuk in Emunah, and a Betochen, and a Simcha. Simcha Ma'ah Vasanes, which brings us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to a renewed devotion and dedication in Hodor Kibluhu B'yamei Achashverosh. Kaboras HaTorah and Kaboras Oil Mitzvahs and Oil Malchus Shemayim. Ma'ahavas Hanais. The Svasemis writes in the Torah on Purim that every year this is a Sgula that is renewed. And we know from the Ramchal, and the Ramchal writes it in more than one source in his form, in Derech Hashem and others form, that in the Jewish calendar, our Yomim Tovim are not just days of nostalgia, just days to remember events of the distant past. To us, nothing is past. Nothing is past. Everything is present. And when the Yomim Tovim come, each Yom Tov brings a renewal of the Oiris, of the Pchenes, of the Rachamei Shemayim. And every year Pesach is Man Cheruseinu. And every year Shavuos is Man Matan Toraseinu. Ubechol Doye V'Doye Chayev Odom Liris Esatzum Kili Yosef Emsayim. We don't then stories about events of the distant past, events of yore. Every Yom Tov is Chidush HaMa'oris. And a Shavuot Shechar B'Tisha B'Av, the Gemara says, don't go to a court case with a non-Jew. These are days of Midas Adin. So to us, the past is not past. It's not about remembering distant events. It's about the present. And all the Oiris and the Pchenes and the Midas Adin, V'zeh Umazeh, the Midas HaRachamim, everything is new every year. The Svasemis writes that B'chol Shona V'Shona B'Yemei Purim there's a special Zgula of V'nahafochu, that Midas Adin is Nefach LaRachamim. And these days are Mesugalim Apolis Oyevei Yisrael, writes the Svasemis. So we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though we did not forget Alanism, we still daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hu Rachaman Hu Yasalonu Nisim V'Neflois Geshem Shel Siso Lavoseinu B'Yom HaMaheim B'Zman Hazeh. So Purim is a day of Torah. It should be a day of Torah, but it's a day of Tefillah as well. And the Tefillah of Alanism is gratitude, Moida ala Ova, V'tzoyak ala Oset, Shakadosh Baruch Yaseh Lanu Nisim V'Neflois, which we so desperately need. and there's so much difficulty and pain and tragedy in the personal level, and also for Khal Yisrael. We have great sekonos in the entire world, so we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rachaman, Hu Yaseh Lanu, Nisim v'nefroes Keshem Shosiso Laviseinu b'yomim b'zman hazeh. So the Malachim HaYotzim in Megillah, שיעלו למעלה, שיתלוו עמנו, and we should only know Chesed v'Racham Mishamayim. We should see Yeshua's Hashem, and we should be zoicha to once again see Nisim v'neflois, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be makabel our tefillah, our avodah, and mitzvahs hayoim, and simchas Purim, שיעלו לרחמים ולרוצה, and we should be zoicha to see Pnei Moshiach Tzidkenu b'meiru v'yomeinu. Amen.